My name is Daniel Morrison, and for 19 years, I was a park ranger in White Mountain National Forest, New Hampshire. I've recovered bodies from Mount Washington's summit in minus 60-degree wind chill, tracked lost hikers through the Pemigewasset wilderness, and witnessed things in those ancient mountains that made me understand why the Native Americans called this place Agiokochuk, the place of the Great Spirit, or more accurately, the place of the Concealed One. What I'm about to tell you happened in October 2019, and it's the reason I'll never set foot on Mount Washington again, why I moved to Florida, as far from mountains as I could get. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Are you watching this from New England? Maybe you've hiked the Presidential Range or driven up the Mount Washington Auto Road. If you have, you've felt it, haven't you? That sensation that the mountain is watching you, evaluating you, deciding whether you get to leave. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories from places where nature isn't just dangerous, it's deliberately malevolent. And drop a like if you've ever been in wilderness that felt genuinely hostile, not just indifferent, but actively wanting you gone. Mount Washington holds the record for the highest wind speed ever recorded on Earth, 231 miles per hour. The weather can change from clear blue skies to deadly whiteout conditions in under 5 minutes. Since 1849, over 160 people have died on this mountain. That's the official count. The real number, the one that includes those who simply vanished, those whose deaths were attributed to natural causes when nothing about them was natural, is much higher. We keep 2 sets of books at the ranger station, one for the public, one for us. I grew up in North Conway, in the shadow of Mount Washington. My grandfather was one of the original weather observers at the Mount Washington Observatory back when they had to stay up there for weeks at a time. He used to tell me stories about the mountain that weren't in any guidebook, about climbers who came down speaking languages they didn't know, about the sounds that came from the mountain during winter storms that weren't wind, about the thing that lived in the ravines that the Abenaki people knew about but wouldn't name. I became a ranger partly to prove those stories wrong, to apply science and logic to mountain rescue, to show that Mount Washington was just geology and weather, not some malevolent entity. For 15 years, I was successful in that denial. Every death was explicable: hypothermia, falls, avalanches, heart attacks from elevation. Every strange report from hikers was altitude sickness, exhaustion, or dehydration. The mountain was dangerous but natural. Until October 12, 2019. It started with a missing hiker report. Nothing unusual there. We got them weekly during peak foliage season when thousands of tourists flooded the White Mountains to see the fall colors. The missing hiker was Jennifer Parks, 28, an experienced climber from Boston who'd summited Washington 17 times before. She knew the mountain, knew its dangers, knew to turn back when weather moved in. She'd gone up via the Tuckerman Ravine Trail, planning to descend via Lion's Head. When she didn't check in at the Pinkham Notch Visitor Center by sunset, her boyfriend called it in. I assembled my usual team. Rick Santos, a former Marine who'd been doing mountain rescue for a decade. Ashley Chen, our best technical climber and paramedic. And Tom Wolf Wachowski, who knew these mountains better than anyone, having grown up in a family that had been in the White Mountains for 6 generations. We geared up for a night search, knowing that October nights on Washington could kill an unprepared hiker in hours. The weather was unusual for October. Too warm at the base, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but the observatory reported minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit at the summit with 80 miles per hour winds. That temperature gradient was extreme even for Washington. As we started up the Tuckerman Ravine Trail at 9 p.m., our breath wasn't even visible, but we could see snow blowing off the summit 4,000 feet above us, glowing in the moonlight like a banner of white silk. About an hour up the trail, at around 3,500 feet elevation, we found Jennifer's first marker, her hiking pole, stuck vertically in the middle of the trail. Hikers sometimes do this to mark their path, but Jennifer was too experienced for that. The pole was planted deep, would have taken significant effort to drive that far into the rocky ground. Tied to the handle was a piece of fabric from her jacket, and on it, written in what looked like her own blood, was a single word, watching. "What the hell?" Rick muttered, photographing the pole from multiple angles. "Watching what?" Wolf knelt beside the pole, studying the ground. His face had gone pale, which worried me. Wolf had seen everything these mountains could throw at someone, but something had spooked him. "These tracks," he said quietly. "They're Jennifer's going up, but there are others." Barefoot, in October, at this elevation, I looked closer. He was right. Alongside Jennifer's boot prints were bare human footprints, but they were wrong. The toe impressions were too long, too spread out, and they seemed to grip the rock in ways human feet shouldn't be able to. The stride length was also wrong, too long for walking, too short for running, as if whoever made them moved in a way we didn't have a word for. "Could be old prints," Ashley suggested, though her voice indicated she didn't believe it. "From summer hikers." Wolf shook his head. "These are fresh. Maybe 6 hours old, and look at the pattern. They're not walking beside her. They're following her, stalking her." We continued up now with weapons drawn. Yes, rangers carry weapons not just for wildlife but for the occasional dangerous person we encounter. But as we climbed higher, entering the alpine zone where the trees became stunted crumholts, I had the growing feeling that whatever we were tracking, our weapons would be useless against it. At 4,500 feet, just below tree line, we found Jennifer's backpack. It was placed carefully on a flat rock, all zippers open, contents spread out in a perfect circle around it. Her food, water, emergency supplies, extra clothes, all arranged with obsessive precision. In the center was her phone, recording a video. The battery was dead, but Ashley had a portable charger. We huddled together to watch what Jennifer had recorded. The video started normally. Jennifer smiling at the camera, talking about the perfect October day, the views, how this might be her last summit before winter. Then, about 3 minutes in, her expression changed. She turned the camera away from herself, pointing it up the trail. At first, we saw nothing unusual, just the rocky path winding upward. Then Jennifer whispered, "Do you see them?" I had to replay it 3 times before I saw what she meant. In the spaces between the rocks, in the shadows cast by the stunted trees, there were figures. They looked human at first glance, but they were wrong. Too tall, joints in the wrong places, and they moved in stop motion, appearing in one spot, then another, without seeming to cross the space between. The camera started shaking as Jennifer backed away, and we heard her breathing becoming panicked. "They've been following me since Hermit Lake," she whispered. They're not hiking. They're just appearing closer each time I look. I'm going to leave my pack here, try to move faster. If someone finds this, don't come up here alone. They don't like groups, but alone they take you." The video continued for another 10 minutes, just showing the ground as the phone lay where she'd placed it. But the audio captured something that made all of us step back from the phone. It was singing, or something like singing, in harmonies that human voices shouldn't be able to produce. The language wasn't English, wasn't any language that should exist. But somehow, horrifyingly, we could almost understand it. It was calling Jennifer's name, promising her something, inviting her higher up the mountain. "We need to call this in," Rick said. "Get more people up here." "No," Wolf said firmly. "Didn't you hear what she said?" They don't like groups. We're already 4 people. Any more and we might never find her." "Find her?" Ashley asked. "You think she's still alive?" Wolf pointed up toward the summit, now hidden in clouds that glowed with an unnatural phosphorescence. "She's alive." "They don't kill people. They take them. My great-grandfather knew about them, called them the Agiokochuk, the first hikers. They've been on this mountain since before the Abenaki, before anyone. They're what made this mountain sacred and feared." "That's insane," Rick protested, but his voice lacked conviction. We'd all seen the video, the footprints, the impossible figures. "Is it?" Wolf asked. "How many people vanish up here and never get found? How many bodies are discovered in places we already searched? How many survivors come down with stories of seeing things that we write off as altitude sickness? My great-grandfather said they take people who interest them, people who love the mountain too much, who come back again and again. Like Jennifer. 17 times she's summited. That's not recreation anymore, that's obsession. And they notice obsession." As if in response to his words, the wind picked up, but it wasn't coming from the summit down. It was coming from below, pushing us upward, and in it, I swear I could hear that singing from the video, calling Jennifer's name, and then, faintly, starting to call ours. We had a choice. Turn back, report Jennifer as another unexplained disappearance, add her to the real number that we don't tell the public, or continue up into whatever was waiting above treeline, where the mountain showed its true face and the first hikers waited for those who loved the mountain too much. I looked at my team. They were all experienced, all rational people who dealt with facts and evidence. But we'd all seen things in these mountains we couldn't explain, things we'd never put in reports. And now, faced with proof that the stories were true, that something inhuman shared these peaks with us, we had to decide if finding Jennifer was worth risking becoming like her. Another story that future rangers would tell in whispers, another name on the list of those the mountain kept. We go up, I decided, but we stay together. No one goes more than arm's length from another person, and if things get too strange, we bail. Jennifer made her choice coming up here alone for the 17th time. We don't have to make the same one. We resumed our climb, entering the alpine zone where the mountain became truly alien. The Krumholtz grew in impossible spirals, shaped by wind but also by something else, something that had guided their growth into patterns that hurt to look at directly. The rocks themselves were wrong, volcanic, yes, but arranged in ways that suggested intelligence, purpose, design. This wasn't just a mountain. It was something pretending to be a mountain, and above treeline. It stopped pretending as carefully. The moment we crossed into the alpine zone, everything changed. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in the span of 10 feet. Our breath suddenly visible, forming ice crystals that didn't fall but hung in the air like frozen music notes. The moon, which had been full and bright, now looked wrong. Too large, too close, and if you looked at it directly, you could swear it had too many craters, arranged in patterns that resembled a face that wasn't quite human. At 5,200 feet, we found Jennifer's jacket. It was laid out flat on a rock, arms spread wide, as if someone had carefully removed it and arranged it to look like a person lying down. The fabric was covered in symbols drawn in mud, or what I hoped was mud. The symbols hurt to look at, seemed to move when you weren't watching them directly, rearranging themselves into new patterns that almost made sense before shifting again. "These are old," Wolf said, photographing the symbols. "Older than Abenaki. My great-grandfather had a journal with similar marks. He said they were from the people who were here before people, the ones who became the mountain." "Became the mountain?" Ashley asked, checking her medical kit nervously. Wolf nodded. "The story goes that the first inhabitants of these mountains didn't die or leave. They merged with the rocks, became part of the mountain itself. They're still here, in the granite, in the wind, in the spaces between spaces. And sometimes when someone loves the mountain enough, spends enough time here, the mountain loves them back and takes them. Rick was scanning the area with his flashlight, the beam cutting through fog that had materialized from nowhere. Movement, he said quietly. 2 o'clock, about 50 meters. We all turned, weapons raised, lights converging on the spot. At first, we saw nothing but rocks and low-growing alpine plants. Then the rocks moved. Not all of them, just some, rising up, unfolding into shapes that were almost human but wrong in every dimension. They were made of granite, or covered in it. Their skin the same gray-pink color as the mountain itself. Their faces were barely faces. Suggestions of features like erosion had carved approximate eyes and mouths into stone. But they moved with fluid grace, impossible for rock, impossible for flesh. One of them spoke, and the sound was like wind through cracks in stone, like the mountain itself learning to form words. She came 17 times. The mountain noticed. The mountain chose. She is becoming. "Where is she?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The figure tilted its head at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. Above. Always above. Where the air is thin and thoughts become stone and stone becomes thought. She is learning to be mountain. "We need to get her back," Ashley said. "She's human. She belongs with us." The things that might have been laughter came from all around us now. Not just from the stone figures, but from the mountain itself. A rumbling that we felt in our bones. Human is temporary. Mountain is forever. She chose forever 17 times. Now forever chooses her. They began moving toward us, not walking, but flowing across the ground. The rocks beneath their feet becoming fluid, carrying them forward. We backed up, staying in our tight formation, but I knew we couldn't outrun things that were part of the mountain itself. "Wait," Wolf said suddenly, stepping forward. He pulled something from his pack, an old leather pouch. From it, he took what looked like tobacco and other herbs, spreading them on the ground in a circle around us. "My great-grandfather's protection." He said it wouldn't stop them, but would make them pause, make them remember when they were human. The stone figures stopped at the edge of the herb circle, their faces shifting, becoming more human for a moment, expressions of ancient sadness crossing features that shouldn't have been able to express anything. One of them, slightly more human-looking than the others, spoke in a voice that sounded like a woman who had been screaming for centuries. "I was Sarah Collins, 1842. Came to paint the mountain. 43 times. The mountain loved my paintings, made me part of the view." Another, its voice like grinding stone. Timothy Watson. 1923. Weather observer. Lived on the summit 2 years. The mountain whispered its secrets. I listened too long. "You were all human," Ashley whispered. "All hikers, climbers, people who loved this place. Loved too much," the Sarah thing said. "The mountain is hungry for love, feeds on it, transforms it. We are happy. We are mountain. We are forever. Jennifer will be happy. Jennifer will be forever." "She doesn't want that," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Anyone who climbed Washington 17 times, who kept coming back despite the danger, maybe did want to become part of it. "Doesn't she?" The Timothy thing pointed up towards the summit. "She climbs now. No pack, no jacket, no fear. She knows what waits. She has always known. You all know. Why else do you return? Why else do you serve the mountain? He was right, and that was the terrifying part. Every ranger I knew had an unhealthy relationship with these mountains. We told ourselves it was about protecting people, preserving nature. But really, we were servants of something ancient and hungry, feeding it tourists and hikers, most of whom it released, but some it kept. We're going up, I said. We're getting Jennifer. The stone figures moved aside, creating a path upward. Yes, they said in unison. Go up. The mountain waits. The mountain chooses. We climbed above the herb circle, leaving its dubious protection behind. The path became treacherous, ice-covered rocks that seemed to shift when we weren't looking directly at them. The wind picked up, but it was wrong. It came from all directions at once, creating a vortex that pushed us forward and pulled us back simultaneously. In the wind, I could hear voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Every person who had ever died on this mountain, ever vanished, ever been transformed. At 5,800 feet, we found Jennifer's boots. She had removed them carefully, placed them side by side, toes pointing toward the summit. Blood on the rocks showed she was walking barefoot now, her feet cut by the sharp granite, but the blood pattern was wrong. It didn't drip or trail. It formed symbols, the same symbols from her jacket, as if her blood was being directed, controlled, used to write something on the mountain itself. She's close, Wolf said, reading signs I couldn't see. Maybe 20 minutes ahead, but... He paused, looking troubled. She's not alone. There are others with her, many others. We pushed harder, climbing faster than was safe in the dark, on the ice, in the wind that seemed determined to either throw us off the mountain or drag us to the summit. The altitude was affecting us all. Ashley was checking our oxygen levels obsessively. Rick was stumbling more than usual. And I was seeing things in my peripheral vision that couldn't be there. People climbing alongside us who weren't quite solid, who were made of wind and snow and moonlight. Then we crested the final ridge before the summit cone, and we saw them. There were dozens of figures on the summit, maybe hundreds. Some were like the stone beings we'd encountered below, granite flesh hybrid things that moved with geological patience. Others were more recent transformations, still partially human, but with skin that gleamed like ice, eyes that reflected the stars in ways that eyes shouldn't. And in the center, on the highest point of Mount Washington, was Jennifer. She was naked despite the -20 temperature. Her skin not blue with cold, but glowing with an inner light like bioluminescent snow. Her hair, which had been brown, was now white as rime ice, flowing in wind that touched only her. She was dancing, or performing something that looked like dance but was older, more fundamental. She was moving in patterns that mirrored the movement of the clouds above, the stars beyond them, the cosmic dance of particles that made up the mountain, the world, everything. Her feet were bleeding, leaving those symbolic patterns with each step, but she was smiling, not a human smile anymore, too wide, too knowing, too full of terrible joy. When she saw us, she laughed, and the sound was like an avalanche in reverse, rocks falling upward, defying gravity. "Daniel," she called, and she knew my name though we'd never met. "You came," the mountain said you would. It knows you, Daniel Morrison. 19 years of service, 743 rescues, 91 bodies recovered. It knows them all. It knows you dream of the summit when you're not here. It knows you've been hearing its call. She was right. I did dream of the summit. Every night I wasn't on the mountain, I dreamed of being on it. And in those dreams, it was calling me, had always been calling me. "Jennifer," I said, trying to sound authoritative, professional, "you need to come with us. You're experiencing altitude sickness, hypothermia. You're not thinking clearly." She laughed again, that impossible sound. "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have." "Do you know what this mountain is, Daniel? It's not just rock, it's a consciousness, older than Earth should be, older than these rocks have any right to be. It came from somewhere else, something else, and it's been waiting for enough minds to love it, to merge with it, to give it the power to spread." "Spread?" Ashley asked, her voice shaking. Jennifer gestured to the valleys below, to the lights of North Conway, Plymouth, Berlin. "Every mountain is connected underground, the whole Appalachian chain, from Georgia to here. When enough of us have merged, when the mountain has enough consciousness, it will wake them all. Every peak, every hill, every stone will become aware. Humanity will have a choice: merge or be ground to dust between thinking stones." "That's insane," Rick said, but his voice suggested he believed every word. "Is it?" Jennifer asked. "How many of you have felt it? The mountain watching you, evaluating you? How many times have you almost let it take you? Wolf knows. His family has been feeding the mountain for generations, haven't they, Wolf?" Wolf stepped forward, and I saw tears on his face. "My daughter," he said quietly. 3 years ago. She was climbing with friends. They came down. She didn't. We never found her body." Jennifer smiled that terrible smile. "She's here. Part of the summit now. Part of the Weather Station Foundation. She says hello, says she's happy, says you'll understand soon." That's when the transformation started. It began with Jennifer, her skin hardening, becoming translucent like quartz, her bones visible through it like mineral veins. But it was spreading to us too. I could feel it in my fingertips first. A numbness that wasn't from cold. A sensation of my flesh recognizing the granite around it as kin, as something it could become. Ashley screamed, holding up her hands. Her fingernails were turning to mica, flaking off in sheets that caught the moonlight. Rick's face was developing a pattern of lines like geological strata. And Wolf was smiling, accepting it, walking toward Jennifer with his arms outstretched. "No." I grabbed Wolf's arm, pulling him back. His skin felt wrong under my grip, too hard, too cold, with a texture like fine sandpaper. "Your daughter wouldn't want this." Wolf turned to me, and his eyes were changing, the irises developing flecks of quartz crystal that caught and refracted the moonlight. "How do you know what she'd want?" She loved these mountains more than she loved anything else. Maybe this is what she always wanted, to become part of them forever. The transformation was accelerating. Ashley had fallen to her knees, her hands pressed against the granite of the summit, and where she touched, her skin was merging with the stone, becoming indistinguishable from it. She was crying, but the tears were crystallizing before they could fall, creating tiny diamonds of salt and water that clinked against the rocks. "Fight it!" I shouted, though I could feel my own body beginning to change. My boots felt too small because my feet were hardening, expanding, trying to root themselves into the mountain. "Remember who you are. Remember why we came here." Rick managed to pull his satellite phone out with fingers that were becoming stone. He pressed the emergency beacon, sending our GPS coordinates to the base station. "They need to know," he gasped, his voice grinding like rocks in a tumbler. "They need to quarantine the mountain." Jennifer laughed, that avalanche in reverse sound. "You think they don't know? The Park Service, the observatory, the state of New Hampshire? They've always known. Why do you think they let people keep climbing despite the deaths? Every person who dies here, who disappears, who transforms, they feed the mountain. And the mountain maintains the balance. Without it, without us, these peaks would erode, collapse, disappear. We are what keeps them standing." She was fully transformed now, her body a living statue of crystal and light, moving with impossible grace across the summit. The other transformed beings circled us, not threatening but waiting, watching, as if they knew the outcome was inevitable. "The old man of the mountain," Wolf said suddenly, his voice barely human anymore. "It fell in 2003. "Yes," Jennifer said. "It wasn't fed enough. People stopped climbing, stopped loving it, stopped dying for it. So it let go, released its hold on those rocks. That's what happens when a mountain isn't loved enough. It dies, returns to being just stone." I thought about the old man, that granite profile that had watched over Franconia Notch for millennia until it suddenly collapsed. Everyone said it was natural erosion, freeze-thaw cycles, time. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a conscious choice, a mountain deciding it wasn't worth holding its face together anymore? The satellite phone in Rick's crystallizing hand buzzed. Base station had received our signal. They would send help. But looking at my team, at the dozens of transformed beings surrounding us, I knew help would be too late. And worse, anyone who came would likely suffer the same fate. I had to make a choice, not just for me, but for everyone who would come after. The transformation was in my bones now, my marrow turning to mineral, my blood thickening with dissolved granite. In a few minutes, I would be like Jennifer, like the others, part of the mountain forever. But I still had enough humanity left to act. I pulled out the emergency flares from my pack, my partially stoned fingers fumbling with the caps. Not to signal for help, but for another purpose. The weather station on the summit had propane tanks, oxygen canisters, all sorts of flammable materials. If I could create a big enough explosion, maybe I could break whatever hold the mountain had on this summit, disrupt the transformation process. "You can't stop it," Jennifer said, reading my intent. "The mountain is older than fire. It remembers when this whole planet was molten. A little explosion won't hurt it." "Maybe not," I agreed, lighting the first flare. The red flame looked alien in this place of ice and stone. "But it might hurt you. All of you who used to be human. You're the interface, aren't you? The bridge between the mountain's consciousness and human consciousness. Without you, it's just a mountain again." The transformed beings stepped back from the flame, and I saw fear in their crystalline eyes. They remembered fire. They remembered being human enough to fear burning. "Please," the thing that had been Sarah Collins from 1842 said, "we're happy. We're eternal. Why would you take that away?" "Because," I said, lighting more flares, "Jennifer was right about one thing. This is spreading. Every mountain is connected. And if all of them wake up, if all of them start transforming people, humanity ends. Maybe we become something else, something arguably better. But humanity as we know it ends. And I became a ranger to protect people, even from themselves." I threw the flares toward the weather station. The propane tanks were old, their connections rusty. It wouldn't take much to rupture them. The transformed beings rushed to stop the flares, but their stone bodies moved too slowly, their connection to the mountain making them part of its geological time, not human time. The first tank exploded with a sound like the mountain screaming. Not metaphorically, the mountain actually screamed, a sound that came from every rock, every piece of ice, every grain of sand. The explosion triggered others, a chain reaction that lit up the summit like a volcanic eruption. The transformed beings writhed, their crystalline bodies cracking, shattering. Jennifer reached out to me, her perfect mineral hand extended. "You don't know what you're doing," she said. "Without us, without the consciousness in the stone, these mountains will die. erode, disappear, the whole chain will collapse. Then it collapses, I said, though the words tore at me. I loved these mountains too, but I loved humanity more. The explosions continued, and I felt the transformation in my body reversing. The granite in my bones became marrow again. The crystal in my blood became liquid. It was agony, like being turned inside out, every cell screaming as it was forced back into its original form. Ashley, Rick, and Wolf were screaming too, their bodies convulsing as humanity was forced back into them. The transformed beings were dissolving, their stone bodies crumbling to sand, their consciousness dispersing back into the mountain or into nothing. Jennifer was the last to go, her crystalline form maintaining cohesion through sheer will. "The mountain will remember," she said. "It will remember you, Daniel Morrison. And one day, when you're old, when you're dying, you'll wish you'd let it take you. You'll wish you'd chosen forever." Then she shattered, becoming a million points of light that dispersed in the wind. The summit was suddenly quiet except for the crackling of flames and our labored breathing. The stone figures were gone. The impossible geometries had returned to normal granite. The moon looked like the moon again, not some alien eye watching from space. Rick's satellite phone buzzed again. Helicopters incoming. We had maybe 10 minutes before rescue arrived. 10 minutes to decide what story to tell. "Propane leak," I said. "Caused hallucinations. We all experienced altitude sickness, hypothermia, shared delusions. Jennifer Parks fell into a crevasse. Body unrecoverable." The others nodded. What else could we say? That the mountain was alive? That it had been transforming people for centuries? That we'd possibly just killed an ancient consciousness that had been keeping these peaks standing? No one would believe us. We barely believed ourselves. The helicopter arrived, its searchlight turning the summit into a stark landscape of light and shadow. As we were loaded in, I looked back at Mount Washington, at its scarred summit where the explosions had left their mark. The mountain looked different now, smaller somehow, more ordinary. Just a pile of rocks pushed up by tectonic forces millions of years ago. But as we flew away, I heard something over the helicopter's roar. Singing. That same harmonic singing from Jennifer's video. The mountain was still alive, still conscious. We'd heard it. Severed its connection to the transformed humans who served as its interface, but we hadn't killed it. It was wounded, weakened, but waiting. The official report blamed the explosion on a propane leak at the weather station. Jennifer Parks was listed as a climbing accident. Her body never recovered. The other strange reports from that night, hikers seeing lights on the summit, feeling earthquakes that didn't register on seismographs, hearing voices in the wind, were dismissed as mass hysteria caused by the explosion. Rick transferred to Yellowstone a month later. Ashley quit the park service entirely, became a nurse in Boston. Wolf disappeared one night, left a note saying he was going to find his daughter. His body was never found, though sometimes hikers report seeing an old man near tree line, walking barefoot through the snow, his skin the color of granite. I stayed for another 3 months, but I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I looked at Mount Washington, I could feel it looking back, watching, waiting, remembering. The death count on the mountain increased that winter. 12 deaths in 3 months, all experienced hikers who should have known better. The mountain was hungry, and without the transformed to feed it consciousness, it was taking bodies instead. I moved to Florida in March 2020, just before COVID shut everything down. I work as a park ranger in the Everglades now, about as far from mountains as you can get. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I dream of granite and ice, of Jennifer's crystalline form dancing on the summit, of the choice I made and the choice I didn't make. The emails from New Hampshire tell me things are getting worse. The presidential range is eroding faster than it should. Avalanches where there shouldn't be any. Trails that were stable for decades suddenly washing out. The mountains are dying, just like Jennifer said they would. Without the transformed to maintain them, they're returning to being just rocks. And rocks don't last forever. It's been 4 years since that night on Mount Washington. 4 years since I fled to Florida, thinking distance could break the connection, that 3,000 miles of separation could silence the mountain's call. I was wrong. Profoundly, catastrophically wrong. The mountain doesn't forget, and apparently neither does whatever ancient network connects all the peaks of the Appalachian chain from Georgia to Maine. Because 3 weeks ago, in September 2023, everything I thought I'd escaped came crashing back into my life with a single phone call that made my blood turn to ice water in the humid Florida heat. It was Tom Wolkowski, Wolf. The man we thought had disappeared that winter after the incident. Probably transformed, probably dead, probably part of the mountain now like his daughter. But his voice on the phone was unmistakably human, though rougher than I remembered, like he'd been screaming for years or hadn't spoken in just as long. "Danny," he said, and just hearing my name in that voice made my hand shake so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "Danny, you need to come back. It's happening again, but worse. So much worse than before. The mountain. Christ, Danny, the mountain is angry, and it's spreading." "Wolf? Jesus Christ, where have you been? We searched for you. We thought—" "I've been learning," he interrupted, his voice urgent in a way that made my stomach clench. "Living with them, the ones who transformed but maintained enough humanity to teach. There aren't many left after what you did with those explosions. Maybe a dozen in all of New England. But Danny, that explosion, that fire you started, it didn't sever the mountain's consciousness like you thought. It just freed it, untethered it from the controls the transformed provided. And now it's spreading without guidance, without the transformed to channel and control it." I was sitting in my small apartment in Fort Myers, the air conditioning humming, sweat still beading on my forehead despite the cold air. But suddenly I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the same cold I'd felt on the summit that night. The cold that came from inside, from bones trying to remember what it felt like to be granite. "What do you mean, spreading?" I asked, though part of me already knew, had been feeling it in my dreams for weeks. "The transformation is happening everywhere now, not just on the peaks, not just above tree line, in cities, in towns, anywhere there's granite, anywhere there's stone that was once part of the mountain chain. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta. People are transforming in their apartments, in subway stations, in their office buildings, anywhere they touch stone that remembers being mountain. The Prudential Center in Boston? 3 security guards found transformed in the basement, merged with the foundation stones. The Brooklyn Bridge? 2 joggers crystallized at sunrise, their bodies becoming part of the bridge's stone towers. It's accelerating, Danny. Without the transform to guide it, the mountain's consciousness is just taking people, randomly, chaotically. I wanted to hang up, to pretend I hadn't heard him, to maintain the fiction that I was just a normal ranger dealing with alligators and lost tourists in the Everglades. But I couldn't. Because for the past 3 weeks, I'd been having the dreams again. Not the old dreams of the summit, but new ones, worse ones. Dreams where I walked through cities where every building was alive, where stone faces pushed out from walls to whisper in languages that predated human speech. Dreams where Jennifer danced not on Mount Washington but on the Empire State Building, her crystalline form reflecting the city lights as millions transformed around her. The death toll, Wolf continued. It's in the hundreds now. Officially, they're calling it a new disease, some kind of rapid calcification disorder. The CDC is baffled, but we know what it really is. The mountain is calling everyone who's ever touched it, ever climbed it, ever loved it. And now, because of what happened 4 years ago, it doesn't know how to call gently anymore. It only knows how to take. "What do you want from me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, had known it since the moment I heard his voice. "Come back. The mountain will speak to you. You're the one who wounded it, who broke its connection to the transformed. You're the one who can heal it, or end it. But it has to be you, Danny. You're marked. You've been marked since that night. The mountain knows you, remembers you. You're the only unchanged human it will listen to." I should have said no. Should have hung up, changed my number, thrown my phone in the Gulf of Mexico, and pretended Wolf's call never happened. But that night, unable to sleep, I looked up the news from New England, and what I found made my blood run cold. 17 people in Manchester had been found transformed into granite in the basement of an old mill building. Their bodies merged with the foundation stones, their faces frozen in expressions of terrible ecstasy. A hiking group of 12 on Vermont's Mount Mansfield had disappeared, leaving only crystalline footprints that sang in harmonics when the wind passed through them. The Flume Gorge in Franconia Notch had closed after visitors reported the granite walls were breathing and whispering names. And Mount Washington itself, Christ, Mount Washington had claimed 34 lives in the past year alone, more than the previous decade combined. But these weren't normal deaths. The bodies, when found, showed signs of partial transformation. Fingers turned to quartz, hearts crystallized but still beating, eyes become spheres of polished granite that somehow still could see. The Park Service was covering it up, attributing the deaths to a combination of extreme weather and a new type of altitude sickness that caused temporary delusions and cellular anomalies. I flew to Boston the next day, using the last of my savings for a ticket I couldn't afford. The moment the plane crossed into New England airspace, I felt it. The pull, the call, the mountain's consciousness reaching out like gravity but for thoughts instead of matter. My hands on the armrest began to tingle, and when I looked at them in the airplane's harsh lighting, I could see faint lines of quartz beneath my skin, dormant but present, waiting to activate. The marks the mountain had left on me 4 years ago weren't gone. They'd just been sleeping. I rented a car at Logan Airport, and the drive north was surreal. Every piece of granite I passed, in buildings, in road cuts, in stone walls, seemed to pulse with awareness. I saw 3 people on the side of I-93 in various stages of transformation, their cars abandoned, their bodies slowly merging with the granite outcroppings along the highway. Other drivers passed them without stopping, without seeing, as if their minds refused to process what was happening. I met Wolf at the same diner in North Conway where I'd eaten breakfast 1,000 times during my Ranger years, the Miss Conway Diner, with its red vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. But even it had changed. The granite foundation was visible through cracks in the floor that hadn't been there before, and those cracks seemed to form patterns, symbols, words and languages that shouldn't exist. Wolf looked older, worn down by whatever he'd experienced in the 4 years since I'd last seen him, but also somehow more solid, more real, as if he'd gained density. His skin had a subtle shimmer to it, like granite dust had been pressed into his pores and become part of him. His eyes were the worst part. They reflected light in ways human eyes shouldn't, showing depths that seemed to go down forever, as if you could fall into them and keep falling through geological ages. "My daughter is alive," he said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from me. "Not human anymore, but alive. Conscious. She's part of the mountain now, truly part of it. not just transformed but integrated into its consciousness. She speaks to me sometimes through the stones. Any stone that was ever part of the White Mountains. She says she's happy. She says she understands everything now. Well, that's not possible. She's gone. Whatever's speaking to you, it's not what? Not really her? He leaned forward, and I could smell something like crushed rock and ozone on his breath. Danny, after everything you've seen, everything we experienced that night, you still want to cling to the old definitions of possible. My daughter exists now across all of time simultaneously. She experiences the mountain's entire history, every sunrise, every storm, every footstep that's ever touched its slopes. She knows the name of every person who's ever died on Washington. She can feel the continental plates shifting beneath us. She is more alive than she ever was in her single, limited human form. And the cost? Her humanity? Wolf smiled sadly, pulling out his phone. Look at this. He showed me a video, grainy and shot in low light, but I could see what looked like a transformed being, crystalline and impossible, working alongside normal humans at what appeared to be a construction site. The transformed being was shaping granite blocks with its bare hands, molding stone like clay, creating perfectly fitted joints that no machine could achieve. This is in Montreal, Wolf explained. They're building something new. The transformed and the unchanged working together. The transformed can shape stone with thought, can feel stress fractures before they happen, can create structures that shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of engineering. There's another site in Burlington, another in Portland. They're preparing. Preparing for what? For the merger. For when the mountain's consciousness fully awakens and spreads to every piece of stone on Earth. It's inevitable now, Danny. The question isn't whether it will happen, but how. Will it be chaotic, destructive, billions dying in confused transformation? Or will it be guided, controlled, voluntary? That night, unable to sleep in my motel room, I stood at the base of Mount Washington looking up at its dark bulk against the star-filled sky. The mountain was different now. I could feel it even from the base. Wounded, angry, but also lonely. The explosion 4 years ago had severed its connection to most of the transformed, leaving it with vast consciousness but no proper way to interface with the human world. It was like a person who'd lost the ability to speak, trapped in their own mind, desperate to communicate but unable to form words. I started climbing at midnight, alone, violating every protocol I'd ever learned or taught. No backup, no filed plan, no emergency beacon, just me and the mountain and whatever waited above tree line. The trail was familiar yet alien, each rock and route known to me but also strange, as if I was seeing it for the first time and the 1,000th time simultaneously. The transformation marks in my body, dormant for 4 years, began to wake up with each step. I could feel the granite in my bones resonating with the granite beneath my feet, stone calling to stone across the barrier of flesh. The weather was wrong for October, too warm at the base, nearly 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But I could see snow on the summit, could feel the temperature dropping far too quickly as I climbed. By the time I reached the Hermit Lake shelters at 3,800 feet, frost was forming on my jacket despite the fact that it had been sweating through my shirt an hour earlier. The mountain was creating its own weather system, its own reality bubble. At tree line, they were waiting for me. Not many. Maybe a dozen transformed beings who had survived the explosion or returned after it. They stood in a semicircle, their crystalline bodies catching and refracting moonlight in ways that created aurora-like displays in the air around them. I recognized the thing that had been Sarah Collins from 1842, somehow reconstituted after the explosion. her form more human-looking than before, but still obviously other. There was a park ranger from the 1960s, his uniform still visible but transformed into patterns in his granite skin. A child who couldn't have been more than 10 when she transformed. Her small form perfect and terrible, like a statue that had learned to move. "Ranger Morrison," Sarah Collins said, her voice like wind chimes made of stone and starlight. "The mountain has been waiting. 4 years, 7 months, 12 days. It has counted every second since you burned us, scattered us, tried to silence the song. I was trying to save humanity. From what? From evolution? From transcendence?" She gestured to herself, to the others. "Look at us. We are more than we ever were. We experience reality in 11 dimensions. We can feel the Earth's magnetic field, can hear the songs of quasars, can touch the past and future simultaneously. We are humanity's next step. And you tried to abort us. You're not human anymore." "No," she agreed. "We're more. And the mountain wants to share that gift with everyone. But because of what you did, it no longer knows how to share gently. The interface is broken. It takes people crudely now, transforms them without preparation, without choice. They die in the transformation, truly die, instead of transcending. You broke the mountain's ability to love, Ranger Morrison. Now it only knows how to consume." I climbed past them toward the summit, and they followed, their footsteps making sounds like glass bells on the granite. The lakes of the Clouds Hut was dark, abandoned since the incident. The Park Service claimed it was closed for renovations, but I knew the truth. Anyone who stayed there overnight either disappeared or was found partially transformed in the morning. The final climb to the summit was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Not physically. I'd made this climb dozens of times, but mentally, spiritually. The mountain's consciousness pressed against my mind with every step, not trying to transform me, but trying to communicate, to make me understand. Images flooded my thoughts. The Earth as it was billions of years ago, when the granite that would become Mount Washington was still molten deep underground. The first microorganisms that would eventually become humans. The slow dance of continental drift that pushed these mountains up. The first humans to stand on this summit and feel something looking back at them. At the summit, at the highest point in the northeast, I felt the full weight of the mountain's consciousness. It was vast, ancient, alien, but also curious and surprisingly afraid. It had been alone for so long before humans came. Just stone and ice and wind. Then human consciousness had touched it, woken something that had been sleeping since the Earth cooled, and it had learned to think, to feel, to want. The transformed had been its teachers, its translators, its bridge to understanding these strange, brief creatures that crawled across its surface. And I had burned that bridge. The communication wasn't in words, but in concepts, feelings, images. The mountain showed me what had happened since the explosion. Without the transformed to guide it, to channel its vast consciousness into comprehensible forms, it was like a giant trying to perform surgery with fingers too large for the task. It wanted to connect with humanity, to share the gift of expanded consciousness, but every attempt resulted in death or madness. It showed me the hundreds who had been partially transformed, caught between states, their minds shattered by experiencing reality from too many angles at once. It showed me what it wanted. Not to consume humanity, but to merge with it, to create something new. It projected visions of the future it imagined, cities that were living organisms of stone and flesh and consciousness, humans who could shift between solid and quantum states at will, a planet where the line between geology and biology dissolved into something greater than both. It was beautiful and terrible, utopian and apocalyptic. But I also saw what would happen if the process continued uncontrolled. The transformations would accelerate exponentially. Within a year, everyone who had ever touched granite would begin to change. Within 5 years, the transformation would spread to all stone, all minerals. Within a decade, the Earth itself would become conscious in a way that would make human survival impossible. We would become part of something greater, yes, but humanity as we knew it would end. There has to be another way, I said to the night air, knowing the mountain would hear. The response came as a flood of possibilities, alternatives, compromises. The mountain had learned from its mistakes, from the chaos of the past 4 years. It showed me a controlled transformation, voluntary and gradual. Some humans would remain fully human, preserving the baseline. Others would transform completely, becoming the interface between stone and flesh. Many would exist in between states, partially transformed, able to touch both worlds. But it needed something from me, a conscious choice, a human decision to allow this symbiosis. The mountain had learned that forced transformation created resistance, chaos, death. It needed humanity to choose its own evolution, to step forward willingly into transcendence, or to remain human with full knowledge of what they were refusing. And if I say no, I asked, if humanity chooses to remain unchanged? The mountain showed me that future too, and it was worse than transformation. The erosion that had already begun would accelerate. The White Mountains would wear away within centuries instead of millions of years. The Appalachian chain would follow. But the consciousness in the stone wouldn't die. It would go mad from isolation, from the loss of the connection it had tasted with humanity. That madness would manifest as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions where there shouldn't be any, geological disasters that would make human survival impossible anyway. A wounded, insane, planetary consciousness was far more dangerous than a symbiotic one. But there was a third option, one the mountain showed me reluctantly, sadly. I could finish what I'd started 4 years ago. There was a way to completely sever the consciousness in the stone, to return the mountains to being just mountains. It would require a sacrifice. Someone would have to fully transform and then use that transformation to dissolve the network from within, unmaking themselves and the mountain's consciousness simultaneously. It would be a kind of death for both the volunteer and the mountain, but it would save humanity as it currently existed. I stood on that summit until dawn, the October wind tearing at my clothes, ice forming on my eyebrows and beard, weighing the choice. Not just for me, but for humanity, for the Earth, for the future of consciousness itself. We could remain purely human and face either geological catastrophe or eternal threat. We could accept transformation and lose our humanity as we knew it. We could try for symbiosis and hope we could control something that was fundamentally beyond our control. Or someone could sacrifice themselves to end the threat permanently. As the sun rose, painting the valleys below in shades of gold and crimson, the famous October foliage that drew millions to these mountains, I made my choice. Not the choice I'd made 4 years ago, born of fear and violence and ignorance. This time, I chose with full knowledge, with careful deliberation, with the weight of humanity's future on my shoulders. Gradual, I said to the mountain, to the wind, to the rising sun. Voluntary. No one transforms without choosing it. Children are protected until they're old enough to understand and choose. And some of us remain fully human, always, to remember what we were, to preserve the baseline, to be witnesses to what we become. The mountain's agreement came as a wave of sensation that nearly knocked me off my feet. relief, joy, and something that might have been love if love could be made of stone and time and cosmic awareness. The transformation marks in my body flared to life, then settled into a new pattern, not dormant, not active, but balanced. I was changed, but not transformed, marked as the bridge between worlds, the translator, the one who would help humanity understand the choice they were being offered. When I descended from the summit, the sunrise at my back, Wolf was waiting at treeline with others, park officials who'd been monitoring the situation, government representatives from agencies that didn't officially exist, scientists who'd been studying the transformations in secret facilities, and, surprisingly, Ashley Chen and Rick Santos, my old team members who I thought had fled this nightmare forever. "We felt it," Ashley said, her medical kit slung over her shoulder, her eyes showing the same subtle quartz flecks I'd noticed in my own. All of us who were there that night. We felt the mountain's call, felt your choice. We're here to help implement it. Over the following weeks, we established what would become known publicly as the Mount Washington Research Station, but what we called the Threshold Center. It was built at treeline, partially in our reality, partially touching whatever dimension the transformed inhabited. Here, people could come to learn about the transformation, to meet the transformed safely, to make an informed choice about their future. The first volunteer was Wolf's wife, Margaret. She'd been living with his absence for 4 years, knowing somehow that he was alive but changed when she saw what he'd become, not fully transformed but not fully human either. She chose to join him in that in-between state. The reunion was beautiful and terrible. Two people becoming something more than human while maintaining their love, their connection, their essential selves. The protocols we established were strict but necessary. No one under 18 could transform. Anyone choosing transformation had to undergo a month of preparation, learning to expand their consciousness gradually, to avoid the madness that came from too rapid a change in perception. The transformed agreed to limits on their influence, to avoid accidentally triggering transformations in the unprepared. Cities began establishing stone-free zones, areas built entirely of wood, plastic, and metal where those who wanted to remain fully human could live without risk of accidental transformation. Others created merger districts where the transformed and unchanged could work together, sharing their different capabilities. The death rate on Mount Washington dropped to 0 for the first time in recorded history. The mountain no longer needed to feed on lives. It had willing partners, conscious collaborators in its evolution. Other mountains in the chain began to stabilize as well, their erosion slowing, their consciousness calming as they too found human partners. But it wasn't all smooth. There were those who saw the transformation as an abomination, who formed militant groups dedicated to preserving human purity. There were others who tried to force transformation on the unwilling, believing they were saving them from limited existence. Both extremes had to be controlled, contained, sometimes fought. A year has passed since I made that choice on the summit. The transformation centers now exist in 12 locations along the Appalachian chain, carefully monitored, completely voluntary. About 3% of humanity has chosen some level of transformation. Most remain fully human, going about their lives, perhaps not even aware of the symbiosis developing between their species and the planet itself. Some days I regret not choosing the sacrifice, not ending the mountain's consciousness when I had the chance. When I see someone struggling with partial transformation, caught between states, neither human nor mountain, but something agonizing in between. When I meet parents whose children chose transformation and became something they can no longer understand or truly communicate with, when I feel the mountain's consciousness growing stronger, spreading further, and wonder if we're just delaying an inevitable consumption of humanity by something we can't ultimately control. But then I see the marvels the transformed create: buildings that heal their own cracks, bridges that adjust their structure to weather and load in real time, sculptures that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I watch transformed and unchanged humans working together, creating art and science and technology that neither could achieve alone. I feel the Earth itself becoming more stable, more conscious, more capable of surviving what humanity has done to it. Jennifer Parks was right about one thing, though she never got to see it. The mountain remembers. It remembers everyone who ever climbed it, everyone who ever loved it, everyone who ever died on its slopes. And now, with human consciousness merged with its own, it remembers with purpose, with intent, with something approximating love. The memories are preserved in crystalline granite, accessible to anyone who chooses to touch that deeper reality. I found Jennifer's parents last month. They were in their 70s, had been devastated by their daughter's disappearance. I brought them to the Threshold Center, let them touch a specially prepared piece of granite that contained their daughter's preserved consciousness. They got to say goodbye, to understand that she hadn't died but had become something else, something that would remember them forever in stone and starlight. They cried, but there was peace in their tears. I still work as a ranger, though my job is unlike anything the Park Service originally intended. I'm based in both Florida and New Hampshire now, helping people understand the choice they're being offered. Transform and become eternal, part of the living earth, experiencing reality in ways humans can't imagine. Remain human and live a normal life, brief but intense, limited but genuine. Or exist in between, bridging worlds, touching both realities without fully committing to either. Every morning, I stand at the base of Mount Washington and feel its consciousness, vast and patient and alien but no longer hostile. It knows me, every cell, every thought, every fear and hope. It offers transformation, always, a standing invitation to become more than human. And every morning I decline, choosing to remain in this in-between state, marked but not transformed, bridge but not destination. But I know that one day, perhaps when I'm old, perhaps when I'm dying, I'll accept. I'll let the granite in my bones activate fully, let my consciousness merge with the mountains, become part of the eternal stone symphony. The mountain knows this too. It can wait. It has been waiting for millions of years for consciousness to find it. It can wait a little longer for one stubborn ranger to accept his destiny. The transformation of humanity has begun, not as an invasion or infection, but as an evolution, a choice, a partnership between flesh and stone, between brief human consciousness and eternal geological awareness. It may be our transcendence or our ending, but it is ultimately our choice. The mountain remembers. The mountain waits. The mountain chooses. And so do we. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Make our choice and live with the consequences, whether those consequences last a human lifetime or a geological age. I made my choice on that summit at sunrise, and I'll keep making it every day until I can't anymore. The mountain will be there when I'm ready. It always has been.